People will die. That's what I hear whenever anyone proposes cutting government health spending.
People will die.
People will die.
People in America will die.
At a town hall, Senator Joni Ernst defended Republican plans to stop illegal immigrants from receiving Medicaid.
They are not eligible.
An audience member shouted,
We all are going to die.
People said her cruelty might cost her job. But what she said is just true. We're all going to die. Politicians who spend other people's money need to make judgments about that. But they rarely do. Instead, politicians often say,
a human life is priceless. Period.
We're willing to spend whatever it takes.
Spend whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, because you can't put a price on life.
We are told it's too expensive to have a single-payer healthcare system. Guess what? Life is priceless.
But in the real world, we put a price on life all the time.
Judges and juries put prices on lives every day.
Attorney Ken Feinberg is often asked to do that.
The Deepwater Horizon rig collapsed into the Gulf on April 22nd.
After a BP drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico exploded, spilling huge amounts of oil, the Obama administration appointed Feinberg to decide how much money victims of the spill should get.
2 explosions today at the Boston Marathon.
After the Boston Marathon bombing, Feinberg was chosen to decide how much money should be given to victims of that bombing. Feinberg was called after Hurricane Katrina.
This area is completely underwater.
And most famously, after 9/11, it became Feinberg's job to reach a settlement with victims.
Take advantage of this settlement.
In this video, Feinberg explains how he puts a price on life and why he now says paying out that money should not be something government does. But first, another look at the nonsense from media and politicians.
We must spend whatever it takes to make sure that every family in America is made whole.
Can't put a price tag on the loss of life.
Every nation puts a price on life.
We have to.
Of course. It's part of the American legal system, and it's done all the time. You walk across the street here, you get hit by an automobile, there's a price, there's a value. The judge will instruct the jury, and the jury will decide the appropriate award. What did the victim make for a living over a work life? What would she or he have made? Add some element of emotional distress, pain, and suffering. There's the value of the life.
I ask him about the people who say,
you can't put a price on human life.
They confuse the algorithm, the test, the calculation for putting the value in life with elements like loyalty, integrity, love, courage. That has nothing to do with the way the legal system calculates value.
And that's good?
What's the alternative? If you start factoring in subjective considerations, like my wife loved me, or my husband died on 9/11 because he was very courageous and helped people escape the World Trade Center, you'll get very inconsistent verdicts where people perceive a bias. Better that the system is a rather cold calculation. You want to talk about love and courage? Go talk to your priest or your rabbi about the better life upon death. But in terms of the realities of how the system works, it is economic loss and non-economic loss.
Why isn't it equal payment for everybody? My daughter's life is worth just as much as anybody in a corner office.
This movie with Michael Keaton playing Feinberg illustrated some of the conflicts Feinberg faced.
The stockbroker, the banker, the doctor, the lawyer who died, they received more money from the 9/11 fund than the waiter, the busboy, the cop, the fireman, the soldier. They earned more, they get more. That's the capitalist system. That's the way we've calculated human value for centuries.
But it doesn't seem fair. They're already ahead, making more money. What about the mother who takes care of kids, the person who takes care of older people? They're just as important or more important.
It may be that there should be a law that says everybody who died gets the same amount. All lives are equal. Congress, when it enacted the 9/11 fund, did not permit that. Congress said, we're going to track the litigation system. And the banker and the stockbroker, we better give them more, otherwise they won't sign a release that I will not sue.
If they did sue, and many wanted to, many had lawyers telling them, I could get you more money. If they did sue, they wouldn't have been paid for years, and the settlements would have cost much more.
There was a cold calculation made by Congress. We don't want lawsuits. The way to prevent lawsuits is to incentivize people voluntarily.
Why don't we want lawsuits?
Lawsuits are inefficient, costly, delay-ridden, and most importantly, the trouble with lawsuits in our country in particular, they are very, very uncertain. Who is on the jury? Who's the judge? How good are the lawyers? You roll the dice, the litigation lottery is our legal system. Or go into a fund. In 90 days, you'll know exactly how much you're going to receive tax-free. Take the money from Feinberg and sign away your right to sue. That's the system. Might not be fair, but that's always been the system.
Somebody's going to have to do the vulgar work of putting numbers on a check.
It really is a rather cold process. Here's the victim. What did the victim earn? What would the victim have earned over a work life? The victim was only 31 in the World Trade Center or on the airplanes. She would have earned this. Add some amount for pain and suffering and the emotional distress of the survivors. There's the award. And I don't know if it's vulgar, but it certainly is transparent and rather calculating.
Tell me what you want, because we could make some adjustments. We could, raise the baselines.
So you think this is about the money?
Of course, yeah.
That it's greed?
No. Not greed. Money, yes. Greed, no. Money puts food on people's tables and it puts roofs over people's heads. There's nothing dirty or demeaning about it, but let's not pretend like it doesn't matter. It does. It helps people move on.
For 10 years, nobody wanted to make the movie. It's not exciting. It's just lawyers talking.
I never thought that anybody would pick up the book rights to actually make a movie about a very unique program in the history of America. And for 10 years, John, I simply, every 2 years, the producers extended the exclusivity of this book contract. And then one day, we've got a script, we've got Michael Keaton, Amy Ryan, and Stanley Tucci in it, and we're going to produce it. I attended the filming. Michael Keaton followed me around a little bit, and they did a pretty good job. I asked my children, what did you think of the movie? And they said, well, it's a pretty good movie, Dad. Michael Keaton's a great actor, but he ought to stick to Batman. We don't think that he conveyed you, well, that's familial love and attention.
Where the law is concerned, this question actually has an answer.
They turned it into a rather, using dramatic license, they turned it into a sort of a interesting discussion of how people are so reluctant to take a chance in filing a claim, the devil we don't know and what's going to happen. But they made it into a pretty good drama, I think.
I'm happy to announce the fund is fixed.
The fund is fixed.
What they meant in the movie, and there was some limited truth to it, people felt that this fund was too assembly line. It was automatic, calculations with a calculator. Why won't Mr. Feinberg give me a full and fair opportunity, one-on-one, to chat about my dead wife or my dead husband? It's not really human, the way they're calculating these awards. And we made it clear that every single victim or their family survivor could come and see me personally. I conducted myself over 900 individual hearings. And when I started doing that on a regular basis, inviting anybody to come and see me privately, that turned around the acceptance rate, it turned around the view of the victims, and it helped assure success. And again, as I mentioned earlier, giving people the right to be heard was inefficient. I mean, you had to slow down the process to see them. And it was tragic and horrific to listen to people, but it helped assure success of the fund.
For more of my content, go to johnstossel.com. I post a new short video every Tuesday. That's at johnstossel.com. How many came in?
97% eventually came into the fund and accepted it.
98% of the total number of eligible claimants have filed claims with the fund.
Successful as this was, now you say government shouldn't do it again?
No. First of all, this was a very unique situation. There have been a lot of claims programs, like BP and the Los Angeles wildfires, etc. But 9/11 was the only program in American history where the government paid the claimants. It was all taxpayer money. Bad things happen to good people every day in this country.
Hurricane Katrina made landfall near Bearis, Louisiana. Power was knocked out almost immediately.
1,000 people died after Katrina in New Orleans with the floods and the horror down there. There was never even a suggestion that there ought to be a Katrina fund. It never even came up. 9/11 was unique in American history, and as a result, you had this very unique compensation program, which I think was successful. I think it was the right thing to do. Don't ever do it again.
Why?
Because you should have seen some of the letters I received during the 9/11 fund. Here's why it's not a good idea to do it again. Dear Mr. Feinberg, my daughter died in the basement of the World Trade Center in the original 1993 attacks committed by the very same type of people. Where's my check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, my daughter died in Oklahoma City when that domestic terrorist blew up the Albert Murrah building, killing him, or her, and 180 other people. Where's my check? And it wasn't just terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, explain something to me. Last year, my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River, and then she drowned a heroine. Why aren't I eligible for a check? Americans do not have government as a source of individual compensation to victims of life's misfortune, even innocent victims. And this was an exception to equal protection of the law. And I don't think you'll ever see it again myself, John.
But wouldn't it be good if there were a Katrina fund or a fund for the woman who saved the kids?
Where does it end? I read today, we want reparations for slavery. You tell me how you're going to set up a fund. Who's eligible for reparations for slavery? What proof? Who's paying the freight? You start thinking about the practicalities of setting up a program designed to compensate individual victims of life's misfortune, you run into some serious public policy, practical problems, I think. American people are very self-reliant. You buy life insurance. You have some protection, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. But in America, we don't look to government to be the guarantor of misfortune. And
people do look to government these days.
Up to a certain point, they do. But other than the bedrock social programs like Social Security, there's no government payment of $2 million or $3 million or $5 million for the death of a banker or a busboy or a waiter or a cop. And it's sort of inconsistent with the political philosophy of America about self-reliance and limited government. Why would people mitigate against risk in day-to-day living if they knew that whatever happens to me, if I'm climbing a mountain that I shouldn't or driving a motorcycle that I shouldn't, it's all right because government's there, government, to provide a check? I think you'd bankrupt the country. The tough part in these cases, all of them, whether it's 9/11, Deepwater Horizon, One Fund Boston Marathon, the tough part is not valuing the life for purposes of determining a check. The tough part, you never get over it, is the emotion. When you invite victims or the survivors to come and see you, they're entitled to due process, the right to be heard. And you hear these stories about what they've gone through with the death of a loved one. It is debilitating. You never get over it. 25 years later almost, you don't get over the echo of remembering those stories from individual survivors. It is harrowing.
You couldn't sleep.
Couldn't sleep then, don't always sleep that well now. 24-year-old woman comes to see me, sobbing. I thought she might collapse in my office. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman. And he left me with our 2 children, 6 and 4. Now you're going to give me $2.7 million tax-free. I want it in 30 days. I said to this woman, Mrs. Jones, this is public taxpayer money. I've got to go down to the U.S. Treasury. We've got to check it out, the bureaucracy. It may take time to process, but you'll get your money. It might be 90 days or 60 days, but you'll get it. No, 30 days. I said to her, Mrs. Jones, why do you need the money in 30 days? Why? I'll tell you why, Mr. Feinberg. I have terminal cancer. My husband was going to survive me and take care of my 2 children. I'm going to be dead in 10 weeks. I have got to get this money now. I've got to set up a guardian. I've got to make sure they have an education fund. I've got to get a trustee for the will. I don't have a lot of time, Mr. Feinberg. Help me. Well, we ran down to the Treasury. We hands-on processed the check, got it to her. 8 weeks later, she died. Now, when you hear these stories over and over, that is where the job becomes very, very precarious and very, very emotional and very, very difficult. One-on-one with victims. It's very, very difficult.
You learned there was one thing you should never say to them.
That's right. I learned the hard way. I make mistakes a lot. You can't help it. An 82-year-old man came to see me. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son at the Pentagon when the plane hit. He escaped from the Pentagon. He thought his sister, my daughter, was trapped. She worked there. He ran back into the burning building to save her. She had escaped through a side door. He died looking for her. Mr. Feinberg, a father should never have to bury a son. He's crying. I put my hand on his shoulder and I said to him, Mr. Jones, this is terrible. And then I made a big mistake. I said to him, I know how you feel.
It's natural. Our instinct is to say, oh,
empathy.
I know how you feel.
Empathy. He put his hand on my shoulder. He says, Mr. Feinberg, I want to give you some friendly advice. You have a tough job. I don't envy what you have to do, but don't ever tell someone like me that you know how I feel. You have no idea how I feel. It sounds robotic, pretentious. Well, I'll never do that again, but every one of these funds, you sometimes do something. You've learned over the years, I have. Listen. The less you say in response to people in grief, the better. Listen, commiserate, empathize, but don't offer editorial comment on what they're going through.
You say this tears you apart, and yet you keep doing it.
It's hard to say no to the President of the United States, Bush in 9/11, Obama after the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, Mayor Menino, Governor Patrick after One Fund Boston, the Congress. It's very difficult when you design and administer these programs that seem to work. They're successful, at least as measured by the number of people who participate voluntarily. It's patriotic, I think. I try and give back to the country a little bit, so I do it. But it isn't easy.
Someone's going to do it, and you've learned to be good at it. So why not you?
Success breeds repetition. So, gee, he did this one. Now let's do One Fund Boston.
2 white explosions near the finish line.
Let's do the Pulse nightclub terrorist attacks in Orlando.
3 hours of terror overnight. Multiple shootouts, hostages, a packed nightclub under siege.
Let's do Virginia Tech with that crazed student that killed 32 people.
The deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history.
Let's do Aurora, Colorado, the movie shooting. People died there.
Mass shooting at this movie theater outside Denver, Colorado.
So you get called on mostly by elected officials who decide. I don't decide whether there ought to be a policy like this. But once they come to you, we're going to do it. Will you be the one? I try and accommodate them if I can.
For more of my content, go to johnstossel.com. I post a new short video every Tuesday. That's at johnstossel.com. Now, one big difference between these tragedies he just mentioned and 9/11 is that the compensation money for 9/11 came from taxpayers. Money for the victims of other attacks came from volunteers. People donated because they wanted to help. And that money came without any strings. Victims got their money fairly quickly because there were few lawsuits.
You would think in America, which loves litigation, you would think that some of these people receive the money, they don't sign a release. I'm going to take the money, give some of it to my lawyer. Now we're going to go after the big bucks. Very rare do people do that. It's almost as if they say, I've been treated fairly, I have these funds, and I am going to try and move on with my life. Litigation plays havoc with your psyche, as you can imagine. We were speaking about this earlier. If you're in litigation, it's very uncertain, the result, and it is time-consuming, and it's delay-ridden, and it's costly.
You're dragged into the court, you sit there, you wait.
We're going to get a trial date 3 years away. 3 years away. And in the interim, I'm living this every day. They want to know, they want to take my testimony to try and convince me that I'm lying or I'm not telling the truth. They want every email that I ever sent to my husband while he was trapped in the World Trade Center. They want to know my medical records to show that I was ill even before I inhaled the toxic fumes. There's that world of uncertainty, and I may not win. I've got to get on with life. If I can get $2.8 million tax-free, sign a release, and try and resurrect my life, there's a lot of incentive to do that.
You've handed out money for lots of disasters.
An explosion on the Deepwater Horizon. The rig burned for 2 days, eventually sinking and triggering the largest oil spill in U.S. history.
What was different about the BP oil spill?
The sheer volume of claims. In the BP oil spill, Deepwater Horizon rig explosion closed the Gulf waters because of the leaking natural oil coming up from that leak. I received in 16 months 1,250,000 claims from 50 states and 35 foreign countries. A dozen claims from Maryland, 3 or 4 claims from Alaska, 2 from Idaho. People would file a claim and say, I own a restaurant in Maryland. My restaurant specializes in Gulf shrimp. There are no shrimp coming up from the Gulf. and therefore I have lost customers. Please pay me $1 million. I'll show you that my revenue is way down. We received claims, so many claims, and yet in 16 months, we managed to distribute $6.5 billion to about 500,000 people. Over half of the claims were ineligible. People took a chance, but ineligible.
BP paid the billions?
BP paid every dime. And BP said to me, at President Obama's insistence, I might add, pay the claims. We'll deal with our captive insurer later. And we think there are other companies that bear some of the contribution of this for letting that rig explode. It wasn't all our fault. There were other companies responsible. We'll take care of them later. Right now, pay the claims.
And how did you decide about the shrimp and the restaurant versus the look at each one individually?
That's right. You show us that your damage was attributable to the oil spill. Now, we'll assume it's attributable if you're in a geographic area like right on the Gulf where the oil came or was present or offshore. We'll pay those claims immediately. As you go inland or go to another state or another country, you're going to have to show a causal connection between the exposure to the oil and your damages.
Major breaking news. Right now, 2 people dead after 2 explosions at the finish line of the famed Boston Marathon.
What was unique about the Boston Marathon settlements?
We received private donations in 60 days, 90 days, of about $60 million. No government involvement. Total private from 100,000 people. One thing you learn in this, what I do, never underestimate the charitable impulse of the American people. They see what's going on in Boston, and they send in unsolicited, they send in checks. And what was unique about the Boston Marathon is it was a gift. We distributed $60 million in 90 days, and all lives were equal. It's not, you don't have to sign anything. So an 8-year-old boy died and a 60-year-old banker died. Both received $2.5 million each.
The Pulse nightclub shooting, also people donate.
Yes, $32 million, private donations. There, we decided not only will we compensate deaths, 62 terrorist deaths, and physical injury, wounded, running from the Pulse nightclub to escape. There were, I think, in the Pulse case, about 10 people who were hiding in the nightclub, hiding as the gunman went from room to room. They hid in a refrigerator. They hid under a table in a locked office. And we decided, even though they weren't harmed physically, we decided that sort of like a hostage, you were in fear of being discovered and killed. We paid them as well.
At least 50 people dead, even more injured tonight.
Each disaster raises new questions.
Authorities say Omar Mateen arrived at Pulse Orlando, a gay nightclub and bar, armed with an AR-15 type assault rifle.
Pulse was an interesting problem that came up also in the 9/11 fund. Could you compensate a death of a person, a gay, a person with a significant other, but not married? We got some pushback in 9/11 about same-sex couples being compensated. By the time of Pulse, most of the country recognized same-sex marriage is allowed, or same-sex living together is allowed, so it was less of a problem, but we still got some pushback.
And the significant other had to provide data to show, yes, we're really a couple.
That's right. And in 9/11, that didn't even help, because back in 9/11, even if you could show that you were a significant other and you had all the documentation in the world under the law at the time, even in New York, you're not eligible. That's changed now, and it's made my life a lot easier in terms of fairness of compensation.
Now you're working on a fund for the victims of the Los Angeles wildfire.
That's correct. There'll be Fortunately, it's still a tragedy. It's less about death and physical injury. I think there's probably 20 deaths or so, and more about homes destroyed, partially burned, smoke and ash, determining the value of a home. There are insurance issues. It's complicated. But Southern California Edison, who set up the fund, has stepped forward and is determined to use some sort of administrative compensation system as a way to try and compensate and be fair to eligible victims.
It wasn't all their fault, but they've agreed to do all the compensation.
They've agreed. They've made it clear that fault remains an open issue in the courts, but they're sufficiently concerned about their customers and what their ultimate liability might be. I don't know. They want to set this program up, and they're funding it, and they've asked me to design the program.
The California bureaucrats who prevented people from removing the deadwood and added to the wildfires, they don't pay anything.
Again, I'm not pointing fingers, but this is the utilities' willingness to step up and pay.
All these years, all these tragedies, you ever wish you'd spent your legal career doing something more fun?
Well, you always wonder about that. I must say, sometimes I think in order to effectively administer these programs with all the emotion involved, sometimes I think you'd be better off a rabbi or a priest rather than a lawyer. I don't think a law degree is a necessity in designing and administering these programs. Sometimes I think I'd rather have a divinity degree or a degree in psychiatry in dealing with human nature and victims. But I do think I'm constantly guided. When I grew up in Massachusetts in the 1950s and 60s, I remember a quote of President Kennedy back then, which has stuck with me ever since, when he said, in our country, every individual can make a difference.
Thank you, Ken Feinberg.
Well, thank you very much. An honor to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. New episodes drop the first Monday of every month. You can subscribe wherever you get podcasts.